All right, hey folks. So YouTube can be an exhausting experience. As soon as you go on, type in something to do with lifting weights, you have any number of people who are just berating you for not working hard enough. I want to talk about that today and why they may well be right, but also specifically break down via the use of some research articles why they might be right. And it's not just a meathead saying, yeah, work harder. And actually, they might be on something. So in particular, I would be talking about Greg Doucette, Jeffrey Verity Schofield, and Steve Shaw. So let's begin. Firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me on your own strength and physique goals, there's a link in the description. So we will start with Greg. Now, you know Greg's famous sort of catchphrase is just work harder than last time. Now, I looked into this and I think there's something to it. So I've long suspected that people, when they think they're going to failure, they're not actually going to failure. And I think this is kind of like Greg's point. It's like work harder, right? So there's a study called One More Rep, and it was done by a bunch of researchers who looked at the average number of reps in the tank that people actually have when they say they've gone to failure. Okay, so what the average person, and this is trained people, they've been training for a reasonable amount of time, how many reps they think they actually have in the tank relative to when they go to failure. And the conclusion, the bottom line was that generally when trained people underpredict their proximity to failure by about 2 reps. So it's anywhere from 0 to 4. So by the use of this study design, they saw that people generally tend to leave 2 in the tank. Now, Greg tends to have his whole, work harder than last time with a lot of guys who talk about RIR, that is reps in reserve. So as in, don't take every rep, don't take every set to failure. So people will tell you, okay, go to 2 reps in reserve. Now, if you think you're going to 2 reps in reserve, but you're actually one of these people. Well, everyone is one of these people, but you're actually going, say, 4 reps from where you think failure is, then you may well be training at 6 reps away from failure. Now, this was highlighted to me a couple of years ago when I was working in with these couple of lads at the gym, and they asked me to put them through just some biceps. So I did. And each of them had 7 reps left from the time they said they were failing to me just shouting that and telling them to do 1 more. So they were pretty trained people, had been training for at least 10 years, and they had 7 more reps in the tank. So I don't think this study is unbelievable at all in the slightest. In fact, I think this is happening every single day. Whenever people go into the gym, there are people out there who are consistently leaving 6 or 7 reps in the tank when they think they're going to failure. So when Greg says just work harder than last time, there's something to that. Yeah, we can view it from the lens of science, say, well, actually, Greg, you don't need to go to failure. But the point is not that, and I don't think Greg would argue that. I think the point is more that people aren't even going anywhere close to failure. So if they go to what they think is failure, at least they'll stand a chance of actually getting in the right sort of, reps in reserve. That's the key. Hopefully that resonates. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's the first thing. First thing is that people tend to leave more reps in the tank than they think they do. Right. Now, bear that in mind. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is this. So where are we? Point number 2 is this. Okay. This was a really good point by Jeffrey Verity Schofield. And in one of his videos, he was talking about, I think he was talking in general about exercises, but he specifically made the mention of rowing. But anyway, he was saying that if you train to failure with a very strict form of row, then actually you're only failing in that form. So failure is only failure in the form that you're doing it in. So to give you the classic example, Arnold with his barbell curls and cheat curls, he would always say, do curls and then extend the set by doing more cheat curls, because that would provide more fatigue to the muscles. And this is kind of like what Jeffrey was saying. He was saying, rather than just stick to strict form and go to failure, put the bar down and go, okay, I'm done. Perhaps extend that out a little bit, add a little bit of body swing once you've failed, and then you'll get a few more reps out and you'll provide more of an inroad into your muscles. So failing with very, very strict form. Is this all starting to sound familiar, guys? RIR, super strict form. Right. So we'll move on to the final point now. But basically, to summarize that, what Jeffrey's point was that training to failure is only failure within that form. It is not the fibers being completely exhausted. So that is a key point to remember. Now, the implication is if you train with a very, very strict interpretation of form, actually, you may well not be fatiguing your fibers anywhere near as much as you think you are. So next point is this. And my boy, Steve Shaw, And Steve has, I think it's not fair to uncategorize him by saying that he says you should train hard, you should train to take your sets to failure for the most part, as long as it's safe to do so. I think that's fair. But in any case, he says train hard. Now, there was a study which was done comparing a 3-set to failure protocol, and that was 1 big set followed by 2 drop sets. And they compared that to a regular 3 sets to a predetermined rep max. Okay. The group that got the better results was the set to failure group. And bear in mind also, the volume that this set to failure group did was half that of the 3 sets to a predetermined repetition max, half. So whereas the failure guys would do something like 10, 3, 2. Okay, so the drop sets would be done with maybe about 30 seconds rest after, just to get the breath back. The 3 sets of self-determined max was done with plenty of time in between, like 4 or 5 minutes. And so that they did 10, 10, 10. So essentially they did double the volume. But the group who trained to failure got better results in terms of hypertrophy and fat loss. So in general, their body composition changed massively favorably by going to failure with half the volume. So you put all this together. You put all this together and you paint a picture of your average evidence-based dude. Nothing wrong with evidence-based, but your average guy who's well-read on all the science and all that kind of stuff. He trains 2 reps away from failure with super strict form, okay? And he never even approaches any kind of body swing or all that kind of stuff, and trains to away from failure. You look at that and imagine, try and sort of conceptualize what kind of stress do you think he's posing on the muscle? How much of a reason does that muscle have to grow if that guy, he's purposely not trained to failure? He's also away from failure anyway, because he's more than likely fits into the paradigm of somebody who undershoots their reps in reserve anyway. So he's probably training more like 6 reps in reserve or maybe more than that. And on top of that, he's training with extremely strict form. So he's only failing within the strictest form. So then figure like what kind of stress is he putting on the muscle compared to someone who purposely tries to go to failure, adds a little bit of body swing in, which is, you know, in a safe paradigm. Who do you think is getting more stimulus? And even the volume doesn't matter either. Just compensating with doing lots of volume isn't going to help either, as we saw in the final study. So who do you think is getting more actual growth stimulus? So in conclusion, yeah, when these guys are telling you to train harder, there may well be a reason for that, which I've sort of put all 3 of these, you know, I've jumped all 3 of these together, and I feel that strengthen the overall message that I want to give, which is actually, yes, you should be training harder. And it's for these specific 3 reasons, because odds are, 1, train to failure may well give better results. And that's probably more relevant as you get more advanced. 2, more than likely, you're undershooting your reps in reserve. And 3, if you're doing all that with a really strict interpretation of form, then you're probably not fatiguing the muscle fibers as much as you think you are. So food for thought. Implications of that, I think, is I'd like to hear what you think in the comments. All right, folks, take care. See you next time.